what are we at this point, 2025, and there's still a gap in the amount that folks get paid who are men versus women? Because it's just some bullshit, isn't it?
I'm now joined by the brilliant Meggie Palmer.
Meggie Palmer.
She's a former foreign correspondent.
She's the founder of Pep Talk Her, a platform dedicated to empowering women in the workplace and helping them reach their full potential.
Meggie is a powerhouse.
There's been 3 studies in 3 countries that has proven that the gender pay gap starts in childhood. Little girls, on average, get paid less allowance than little boys. What? Isn't that wild? I found out my paycheck was a lot less than the men in the newsroom who I sat next to. And I was so naive. I just thought they'd made a mistake. They didn't take me seriously until I got a lawyer. It was the first time I'd experienced anxiety. I couldn't leave the house for a while. I was so stressed. And if you're always doing the sort of like busy work on the outside, the surface level stuff, it's not what ultimately is going to get you promoted. Keep the receipts, put all those positive pieces of feedback into the app so that you have data for your performance reviews, for when you're asking for more money.
So how can men be an ally to women in the workplace?
Now, here's something that is kind of mind-blowing.
Hello, Meggie.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me today on All Over Again podcast.
It's a pleasure. I'm delighted to see you. It's been too long, my friend.
It's been way too long. Like lifetimes and chapters ago.
Yeah. I've had a baby since I saw you, I think. Was I pregnant maybe?
No.
Yeah.
It's been a minute. I mean, we're talking beginning of 2020. We were at an event that I threw for Hey Mama.
That's right,
at DVF.
Yes.
And meatpacking.
It was amazing.
It was an obnoxiously cold evening. Today is all about you.
Okay.
I want to hear all of the things.
Okay, yeah.
And starting with, why are you on a mission to close the gender pay gap?
Well, because it's just some bullshit, isn't it? I mean, what are we at this point, 2024, and there's still a gap in the amount that folks get paid who are men versus women, even though it's illegal. In a lot of Western countries, it's not legal to pay folks differently for doing the same job, and yet it still happens. I've personally experienced it. I'm not sure if potentially you have. Yes, I can see you nodding away. I talk to thousands of women every year who also experience it, and I just think it's wrong. Injustice really annoys me, and there are many issues in the world, let's be clear, and this is one of them, and it's something that I feel very passionate about. And I also love the idea of, firstly, helping to raise awareness of this challenge, and secondly, I want to get more money in the hands of women. Because when women have more money, they have more choice. And to me, that is one of the most important things in the world, is to give women choice, to make really strong decisions for what suits them in their stage of life.
And freedom.
Yeah, freedom. Choice gives you freedom. Money gives you freedom. You know, the capitalistic society we live in is what it is, if you like it or not. For now, that's the way it is. And it allows us to, make choices, have freedom to leave a shitty job, freedom to leave an abusive partner, freedom to support family and friends or charities who need it, freedom to whatever, buy the car, I don't know, whatever you want to do, no judgment. But that's why I'm really excited to make women more wealthy.
And freedom from a lot of financial stress.
Totally.
Which is one of the most stressful life experiences one can have. So speaking of all of these things, what is the gender pay gap right now?
So it depends on the country, depends on the industry, more or less 15-ish%.
Okay.
Depending on how you slice and dice the numbers, right? Whether you're looking at all jobs, whether you're looking at part-time jobs, full-time jobs, but let's call it 15 to 20%-ish, depending on where you are, right? Now, here's something that is kind of mind-blowing, because there's a lot of haters that are like, well, it's just fake news. It's not really a thing. If women chose other jobs, if women didn't have kids, there'd be no gap. And what's really interesting was a couple of years ago, I was at a summit that Time's Up organized, and they had one of the Harvard professors there who focuses on the gender pay gap. And she really broke down the 3 key causes that contribute to this gap, right? And one of them is the fact that women are more likely to have time out of the workforce, right? You and I both have a child. Women are more likely to care for elder parents and relatives as well, right? So that is true, and that can contribute to how much we're paid. But you can strip that out of the data, and there's still a gap. So then we look at the second reason. Okay, so why else is there this gap? So the other thing we know is that there's more, for example, there's more women teachers, more women nurses. Girls from a young age are socialized to be more predisposed to go into certain professions versus how boys are socialized from a young age. So we do see more women in roles that are overwhelmingly paid less. Right? So, for example, a teacher earns less than an investment banker, or a nurse earns less than an engineer, for example. So even taking into account, the types of jobs that women are more likely to go into, even if you strip that out of the data, there's another gap. And there's still a gap that exists, right? Even when you take these things into account. And so what researchers hypothesize is that final piece of the gap is attributed to unconscious bias and discrimination.
Wow.
Right?
So what I'm hearing from this is education, education, education.
Totally.
Particularly for our younger people.
Yes, education is really important. That's why, everyone who's listening, talking about this, starting to have conversations.
Yes.
Also policy is really important. And I mean that at a legislative level and also at a business policy level. So there's a bunch of different levers, and Pep Talk Her, my company, we really focus at the grassroots level. So supporting individuals to understand this, supporting them to navigate and negotiate within the confines that we know can impact women. But okay, here's another unfun fact while we're on the topic. Oh, you're grimacing. You're like, I don't want to hear it.
Bracing myself.
I know. So, okay, this is so wild. So there's been 3 studies in 3 countries that has proven that the gender pay gap starts in childhood. So it actually starts when kids are about 8 years old, because little girls on average get paid less allowance than little boys. What? Isn't that wild?
Okay, wait. So first and foremost, how much should we be paying little girls and boys for their allowance? I mean, there's a whole entire controversy.
Oh, really?
Or like a debate,
okay,
I should say, over whether or not to give your kids allowance. But there's a debate over everything these days.
Always.
I'm debated out on the topic of how to parent.
Right. Yeah.
It's mind-boggling, right?
Yeah.
So what should we be paying our little girls and boys? Or are parents just deciding, oh, it's a boy, I'm going to give him $10 a week, and my little girl's going to get $5. Like, is there, what is the actual, what should we be doing?
Yeah. And I mean, Farnoosh Torabi, who I know we both know and love, she has an amazing podcast as well. Yes. She talks a lot about this. So she's probably a better place to tell you how much you should pay. But what I can tell you is that to the piece of the unconscious bias and the discrimination, that's actually what's at play here in terms of why it's different. So I don't know what you should pay. And my son's only 2. So hopefully I've got a couple of years before I have to deal with that. But what I will say is parents aren't assholes. Like, it's not like you intentionally I'm going to screw over my daughter. No one's thinking like that. But it comes back to this idea that we have this preconceived idea that if you help in the garden, or if you mow the lawn, or whatever it is, if you cut the grass, that's a really tough job. That's hard work, and you should probably get, I don't know, $6 or $10 for that, or whatever. If you help, cook a meal, or if you help fold the laundry, that's cute women's work. That's nice that you contributed. But there's this perception that we've all been socialized through the media, through our parents, our grandparents, that one is harder, quote unquote, than the other, right? And the other thing about the gender pay gap is as more women go into certain professions, the average pay actually reduces. The reason I'm telling you this is there's this historic, bias that we've all grown up with that we have to kind of reprogram now that we understand the data and what the figures are telling us. It's so interesting, and it's going to take generations for this to change. We're looking at about 200 years before we close the gap. And the reason for that is it's so entrenched. Even if we're trying not to do it, it creeps back in because we have these ideas that we saw as kids, and they're deeply programmed within us.
It is mind-boggling.
I know.
Okay, so let's take a step back. Mm-hmm. What brought you to this space? What was the experience where you decided to pivot from broadcast journalism to this mission of closing the gender pay gap?
Well, I think it's a lot of entrepreneurs, it was first person experience. So I had a great job. I was a reporter and foreign correspondent originally from Australia. You can probably tell from my very strong twang that I can't seem to kick even after 7 years in New York City. I was a journalist, traveling all over the world, telling amazing stories, did political journalism, did police reporting, court reporting, foreign affairs stuff. And at one point in my career, I found out actually through a male ally that my paycheck was a lot less than the men in the newsroom who I sat next to. And I was so naive. I just thought they'd made a mistake. I was like, oh, I'll just tell them. They'll fix it. It'll be sweet. So I told them, I was like, yo, like, what's the situation here? And they're like, yeah, so if you're not happy about it, why don't you quit or take us to court? That was the ultimatum that they gave me. And so
that got rough real fast.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the world doesn't like it when women speak up and speak out, right? I had a decision. I was like, okay, I have a choice. And to be fair, I had privilege in that I had been saving for a long time. So I had a bit of a safety net of cash. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a mortgage. Like, I had the capacity to make a choice to kind of stand up for what I thought was right. And I kind of felt compelled to I ended up getting a lawyer, which, is never ideal. But I just was like, I tried to be the good girl. I tried to be friends. We tried to mediate. I hired a mediator and be like, yay, kumbaya, let's just figure this out. And it didn't work. They didn't take me seriously until I got a lawyer. But I was just like, what if I was pregnant? What if I was the sole breadwinner? What if I had a mortgage? Like, those folks wouldn't have necessarily the political capital to speak up because they needed the job and the income. Whereas I was like, well, I backed myself. I knew I'd get another job as a journalist. So yeah, I went through a very protracted legal battle, which I wouldn't recommend, but also, in this instance, it had to happen. And sadly, for a lot of our clients at Pep Talk Her, it sometimes has to happen, not always. And so that was just kind of what happened to me. It was my lived experience. It was the first time I'd experienced anxiety. I couldn't leave the house for a while. I was so stressed by the whole experience. In the scheme of things, a first world problem, because I had that safety blanket. I knew I had cash savings if I needed it. But it was a lot. And I started to realize that it was happening to a lot of people. And I had been naive until that point, if I'm honest. And so then, friends of friends started asking for advice, and friends who got laid off when pregnant started, commiserating to me. And then I started helping them navigate the machinations. It just kind of spiraled into a thing. And I was like, oh, wait, this is an unmet need. Folks need support. They need community. They need resources to understand how to navigate and negotiate these situations. And then here we are, I guess, like 10 years later.
So you're still in Australia at the time?
So yeah, I was in Australia at the time. Mm-hmm.
And is this what made you make your move to New York City?
Kind of, yeah, because it was a bit of a different time when I was still in Australia. And I stayed in journalism for a little while before moving to New York City. I'd lived in London. I'd worked for the BBC there for a long time. But my partner had never moved abroad. So it was partly like personal adventure, like let's live overseas again. And it was partly like seeing the opportunity. And at the time, this was before the Hillary Trump election. At the time, the momentum around these sort of issues in America seemed to be moving in the right direction. And so it kind of felt like this was where these conversations were being had. In Australia at the time, people were not as happy or as comfortable to have these conversations. Thankfully, a lot has changed since then. But when I moved to New York, it was a breath of fresh air for me. Like where we met at the Wing all those years ago, like all these people who were excited to talk about equality, excited to talk about, what was next, making change, being female founders and finding community. So yeah, delighted that y'all have adopted me here.
So the moment we've been waiting for.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
What would you do all over again and why?
I would stop being such a people pleaser, particularly in a work sense. Like I reflect on like when I was young, like even when I was 15 and I did work experience, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer and a barrister because I love to argue and debate. And I did work experience with these like fancy lawyers, with a woman lawyer who was amazing. But I would even be in the elevator with her and these like fat 60-year-old old skeezy lawyers would look me up and down and like touch me on the ass and all this gross stuff. Ew. And I'd just be like I would just say nothing. I would just turn away. I would say nothing because I was the good girl and like keep the peace and like you're the intern. And, even I'm sure this has happened to you in corporate America, like the things people say, the way people behave. And my training was to sort of smile and nod or laugh nervously or just escape from the situation and not actually say anything. And I actually feel that I let down everyone by doing that. I let down myself, but I let down other women by not saying anything. I let down, frankly, those men as well, because perhaps like it's not my job to be the boundary and to show them the way, but also in not doing that, they probably went on to keep doing it to other people.
Totally. You found your voice since then, for sure.
I found my voice, and I think I could always be bigger, not to make everything about gender, but I do observe even like some of my dear friends who I love, who identify as male. Sometimes I'll notice over a wine, we'll be having a conversation and me or one of my friends will say something and they'll be like, really? And I'll be like, yeah. and they'll Google it to fact check or something like that. And I'll be like,
if I was a guy,
you would never fact check me if I was one of the lads.
Yeah.
And it's unconscious, and they're excellent humans, and they're excellent husbands, they're excellent friends, they're not assholes. And yet there's these microaggressions that we see every day. And again, as a white woman, there's so much privilege that I don't even understand, right? And I know that the women of color listeners have had it 1,000 times worse. When we think about the gender pay gap, the statistic that I gave earlier is significantly worse for folks of color, right? And for folks from underrepresented backgrounds. And I think it's important to remember that for all of us, actually, because we have, I feel, a big responsibility to pay forward that privilege that for whatever reason, this is how I was born. I actually have to pay that forward to other people, because women and men paid it forward to me who were further along in their journey. You know, we stand on the shoulders of feminists and activists who've come for centuries before us. And so, yeah, I think if I had my time all over, I would find my voice earlier. And I'm not saying that I would necessarily be rude or whatever. Maybe I would channel that rage, but I would speak up more. And I'm honestly still a work in progress. Like there's a lot of reprogramming that I've had to do, because, you know, when I grew up, it was like, you've got to be polite, you've got to be nice, don't be embarrassing, you know, just kind of keep the peace. And that's a lot to unravel, I think.
It's a lot. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of conditioning that happened that we have to unravel, right? Mm-hmm. And even then, I think sometimes now I grapple with, but what's too far?
Where is the line?
Everything has become so hyper conscious to the point where the world feels like it has become so hypersensitive. Maybe woke is another way to describe it, to the place that it's almost like there's a focus that is sometimes put on who you are before your abilities and capabilities. And I think that is perhaps an unsavory byproduct that doesn't serve anyone in the end. So it's hard. I don't know. I would love your view on that. I mean, I feel like in terms of equity, I think that equity belongs to the person that is most capable and deserving, right? Like I think that in terms of, I know there's this huge pay gap, but just because I am a woman, if I have less experience than, let's say, a guy.
Sure.
Right? Like I personally probably wouldn't try to make that fight. However, if I was, and totally. I've been on this track before, like where I've had that experience with a colleague, right? Right. Who I knew got paid significantly more than I did.
And when we think about the gender pay gap, the issue is when it is the same job with more or less the same experience for the same pay. And so if you're a junior, there is a reason that you are not getting paid the same as an executive, right? Because you don't bring as much value to the company. So that part is legal. That's okay. I think most of us would agree that that's fair and reasonable.
Most of us would, but I don't know that everybody does anymore. This is why I just feel like it's gone so...
Generationally, you feel?
Generationally, and otherwise I think it's just gotten so crazy.
Well, we're in a time of big change, right?
It's huge.
We're having a huge reckoning as a society, which is probably overdue. And in any period of big change, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable, right? For a lot of us. Yeah. I believe that in the long run, that will lead to better results for society. For example, if you look at gender, we know that if we can increase the percentage of women in the workforce, GDP for countries increases. And similarly with the gender pay gap, like when there's more money in the system, it's that momentum, it's that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Of like, it creates more money, people are happier, that you'll retain them longer in the business, all those kinds of things. But I think we also have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And, you know, that's something that I've had to learn too. Like, you know, staff members on my team have challenged me at times, and they see the world differently from me, and they've pushed me in different ways, which isn't always easy. It's not always fun, but I'm kind of grateful for that, because I do think that the more we can take our own blinkers off, whether they're conscious or unconscious blinkers, I think we can see the world through other people's viewpoint. And that allows us, at the very least, to have more empathy.
Absolutely.
In how we move forward. Yeah.
And I think that the world is lacking in a lot of empathy at the moment, or perhaps they're so fixated on their own. So how can men be an ally to women in the workplace? Like, what are some strong, you know, opportunities that you've seen?
Well, And I hope that your listeners can think of someone in their career or their life who's been an ally for them. And I have to say, like, I have had a lot of men and women who've helped me enormously on the journey. So, for example, when I left one network because of the legal situation, I was a male ally who was like, I'm going to make 3 introductions for you to another network. And that was how I ended up getting my next job. So that, like, to me, that is allyship in action.
1,000%.
Right? Lots of people took a call with me or a coffee with me, you know, like that is allyship. If you're in a meeting and someone is clearly mansplaining, as particularly a white male, but as any man in that room, there is a level of unconscious power more so that you actually hold in that situation. So you have the ability to say, Jonathan, I actually think that Natalie was going to say something. Natalie, you just want to go ahead? I'd love to hear your perspective. And so it's also using our political capital to further the greater good, I believe. And again, even as women, there's things that we can do. And we can be like, you know what, I'm actually going to stop you right there. That's inappropriate. And we're going to shelve that and I'm going to come over here. Like just having that courage to draw a line in the sand where we see something happening that's wrong. And it's this whole, like, if you see something, say something, and more importantly, do something about it. But in terms of men in the workforce, some tactics that we see that are really helpful is making sure that there's diverse folks on interviewing panels. So
1,000%.
So that interview candidates feel that they can connect with someone.
Yes.
Making sure that you ask the question before people are promoted, you know, the jobs for the boys idea, if you see that happening or rearing its ugly head, asking the question and being like, just wanting to check if we've done a standardized, you know, process before making this decision. Like starting to use your power, having office hours and being available for people up, down, sideways in the organization to connect with you. Because, you know, firstly, that allows you to also create a reputation as someone who's open, who's connected to more people, but also you'll start to hear things that maybe are not your experience as a man in the workplace. And when you hear those other things and when they don't sit right with you, or when you're told from other people that they're inappropriate, how can you then use your power, implicit or explicit, within the business to create that change?
It's so true. And I think at some point when I was in corporate America, I remember there was just a place and time where I was just, I loved my job, but I was tired of any extraneous BS.
Yes.
And I remember a specific time that I was actually at Yankee Stadium and I was interacting with a former Yankees player. And I was the only female in the room, the only female exec in the room. But he asked me if I could get him a coffee. And I looked at him and I'm basically like the reason why we are all gathered there on that day. And you know, I've negotiated the sponsorship and we're funding this experience and, you know, putting dollars towards the entire organization. I looked at him and I said, it's not my job. Get your own damn coffee or find someone who works here.
No, you didn't. Yes. I love it.
I said it with a smile.
Good for you.
And I made a little bit of a joke out of it.
Right.
Because I can't do the same kind of delivery that a man might do. Because that would potentially be like counterproductive. But I can say it in my own way. And he thought that was really funny. And he proceeded, by the way, to, I think, stalk me for the next year for a car. And in which I was like, no, you cannot have you can buy one just like anyone else.
It's so, but that's very courageous. And I have to say, like, because I used to, one of my first jobs out of university was I was working for a brewery in their marketing team for a big beer brand. And, you know, like sports players, football players, things like that, you know, more. But I don't know if I would have had that courage like earlier in my career. I think, like, truly, I think, and maybe there's listeners here who want to reach out to you on Instagram, to the podcast Instagram, or to me on the Pep Talk Her Instagram and let me know your stories, because actually it's important for people to hear stories like that. Of there's a line in the sand, and again, you don't have to necessarily like be rude about it. And by the way, more power to you if you want to be, because like that's a rude question to ask you, but it's interesting. It's really, I think it's like a muscle that we have to stretch, you know? It's like if I want to get massive biceps at the gym, it's not going to happen after 1 or 2 Pilates classes. Right. But if I do it all the time, it becomes a really strong neural pathway that I'm able to reflect back on and be like, there's a boundary in how you treat me and what is expected of me. And just because I'm the only woman in this room, I'm not here to do the emotional labor that you have seen done in the household or elsewhere in society.
Right. And you don't have to wait like I did until you're 35, right? And just tired of the things to be able to exercise your voice. And so to your point, I love that you've got this platform. Since we have last seen each other, you've become a mom.
I have. Yeah, I've got a 2-year-old.
How has motherhood changed you in the most unexpected way?
So I have a little boy called Hugo, and it's just been a delight. Like, I'm that annoying person who thinks it's lovely and delightful, which I've had a very blessed experience. And he's a pretty good kid. He's always been a pretty good sleeper. You know, we have a lot of support. We have a nanny 4 days a week. And so we've really tried to structure it to support ourselves. And I would just want to acknowledge that is a big privilege, but it's been great. I think what Hugo has taught me, he's taught me to slow down. Like literally and metaphorically, just like really stop and smell the roses. And even when I'm trying to get him to sleep at night and I'm like, I just want to whine, I'm like, you know what? There's only so many more months left where he'll need me in the bedroom with him while he falls asleep. You know, like it's not forever. But the other thing he's also taught me is like the softness and the love of boys. Like he's so loving and very tender and very compassionate. And I think sometimes in society, men are taught to be, you know, a certain way, to be alpha and to be, you know, I don't know. It's just kind of taught me that they don't always start out that way. And so, you know, the challenge for me is now to figure out how do we raise him to lean into those qualities that he inherently has had as a young kid and carry those into adulthood. Because what a wonderful quality to have as an adult man as well. So it's been a real blessing. I feel very lucky.
So you're already thinking about how you can raise Hugo to be an ally for women.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think, what is it they say that kids do what they see, not what they hear. And there's a couple of things I've learned from some friends. One of my friends, they have 3 kids and they have a car. And the daughter who was 6 said to the grandma one day, oh yeah, no, mummies don't drive cars. And the grandma was like, wait, what? And she was like, no, only daddies drive cars. And it's just because she'd only ever seen Ben driving. It's not that Rach doesn't drive. She does. She's a great driver, but she's just always like, yeah, Ben loves to drive. Let's go. And so we've tried to I try to act. Ryan actually loves driving. I don't mind it. Some would say he's a better driver than me. That's up for debate. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, so we try and do both, you know, we both try to drive, just like little subliminal things. Like Ryan does a lot of cleaning in the kitchen. That's kind of his domain. And so I just like trying to give him subliminal messages. But I think it's interesting too, like pop culture. One of my friends works in kids TV and she was telling me her daughter was watching Paw Patrol. And we're not quite at the Paw Patrol stage yet. So I haven't actually really seen any episodes, but she said that there's like only one female Paw Patrol dog or something.
I guess so. We skipped right over that phase.
Oh, you didn't have the Paw Patrol phase? We never really did
Paw Patrol, but now that you're saying that, I know there's one pup that is dressed in pink.
In pink and purple. And so the mom said to the girl, because she's really conscious of these things, and the daughter was watching Paw Patrol, and she's like, oh, why do you think there's only one Paw Patrol dog? There's like 5 or 6 of these rescue dogs, and only one of them identifies as a girl dog. Anyway, and the daughter was awesome. The daughter was like, oh yeah, because the other dogs are at work. And I was like, this is amazing, because she's the primary breadwinner in her family. And it's so interesting. So her daughter was like, yeah, of course there's only one dog. The other female dogs are super busy, like doing all the stuff that they do.
Like, oh my gosh.
Isn't that interesting? Because the perception is, like, my perception would have been that's outrageous. There's only one female dog. And it's just so interesting how kids see things differently to what we could ever even conjure up.
That is just mind-blowing.
Isn't that interesting?
Right. Well, I am interested to hear as you go, because I think that a lot of women are cognizant of this now, right? In a way that we may not have been as kids.
Well, you know, one thing that's interesting, my mom and dad are both staunch feminists, and they really raised us. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and it was very much like a girls can do anything era of the late 80s, early 90s. And what's so interesting is that my brother is a very successful engineer, and he is a stay-at-home dad. So he has a job and he doesn't travel, and he does only very restricted hours because he's the primary caregiver for my niece. His wife is a surgeon, a doctor. And so it's interesting. Like, I think, you know, also looking for the examples that are counter to maybe what we would see when we have negative experiences in the workforce. I also love seeing examples of men who are bucking the trend and doing things differently and, paving a new way. Yeah.
Paving a new way. So in your experience, I'm sure you've come across the motherhood tax quite a bit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about your view on what that is for our listeners and also what we can do in support of making it go away.
For folks who aren't familiar, the motherhood tax is basically the data that shows us that when women have children, their income plateaus or reduces. When men become fathers, their income goes up immediately / over time. And it's really interesting. And I don't know what the answer to that is, truly. I mean, I think, you know, Eve Rodsky's doing a great amount of work with this with her book, Fair Play. There's the game, Fair Play, which if you haven't already got it, I really recommend it. It's like $20 or $30 on Amazon. It's great because it helps you to really codify who is doing what physical labor, but also mental and emotional labor around the house. Like who is remembering it's Mother's Day in Australia because it's different to here for our mums in Oz? Who is remembering when it's vaccine time for Hugo? Who is remembering it's our friend's 40th, so we need to get like all of those things, as well as who's cutting the grass, who's, you know, taking the trash out, etc. But just like seeing it in black and white can be quite confronting. So I think it really starts at home and having that understanding as a partnership or as a family as to what does that split of the mental and emotional labor look like? Because if you understand it at home, you can then be more conscious at work. And I don't know if you found this when you were in corporate as well, but I remember there was a lot of that extra mental load that women in the workforce were supposed to take on outside of our job KPIs. So I was working in newsrooms, but if there was someone's birthday and we were doing like cheese platters and wine, guess who went and helped the executive assistant to go and set it up? Like me and the other junior female reporters, none of the men, none of the editors, none of the cameramen, who most of whom were men. It was the women who did that work. But I think until there's those boundaries put in place, no one understands or values that extra work that is being done that just doesn't have a price tag put on it.
Bravo to her.
I know, right? I know.
Truly.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something else that once happened to me. I remember hosting a meeting with my clients, again, when I was on the corporate side of things, and having an agency partner, of course, male, who was greeting everyone as they were entering the room. And meanwhile, like the breakfast was like not organized. It had been dropped off and it was like a hodgepodge. By the way, my company is paying this agency guy to help coordinate and all the things. Yeah. And he's greeting and expecting me to do that. Wow. And I did. And then I remember it happened again at another meeting. And I remember having a conversation with him like, absolutely fucking not. Yeah. You've got to deal with this. Like, I don't care how old school agency you are. Right. Like this is part of your job description. Yep. If you can't handle it, then set it up better to find someone else to support you to do it. Totally. But I'm actually your client. You're paying. But he's getting the upside from the network effect. Right. Of building those relationships. Meanwhile, you're over rearranging a cheese platter. The one thing that's interesting about that is that you raise the issue of like, in the workforce, there's like busy work and then there's strategic work, right? Yes. And I think the one thing that we're often socialized that the busy work is just as important as the important work, but actually thinking about that strategically, and that's what we do at Pep Talk Her, is it's like we're trying to get people promoted faster and getting them paid more money. And if you're always doing this sort of like busy work on the outside, the surface level stuff, it's not what ultimately is going to get you promoted into more senior and senior levels where the higher pay is. So actually doing a bit of an audit of where you're spending your time and where people are perceiving that you're spending your time is really valuable. And again, conditioning yourself to be okay with dropping that stuff that isn't serving those bigger macro goals for the business. I love that. Yeah. Let's talk for a minute about how women can negotiate to be paid more. Yeah. Well, the first thing is to have conversations about money. And to your earlier question about what can men do as allies, you know, one of the biggest things that men can do is to share openly about how much they're making, about how much they used to make, about how they negotiate it. And by the way, I know it's seen as a bit of a radical thing, but I do think that women, we can also do more in service of that as well, starting to openly share about money. Because if we don't know what other people are earning, it's harder for us to shift our mindset to understand what is possible for us as well. So there's so much power in that. So listen, the first step for negotiating a higher pay raise is firstly to make sure that you're doing it every year. So assuming that you're not slacking off and massively failing, if you're doing a great job, you need to be asking for a pay raise every year. You might not get it
every single time, but you've got to ask the question. I'll tell you why. I had a client once and she said to me, I had her maybe 6 or 7 years ago. She's like, I can't ask for a raise. It doesn't work. And I was like, okay, so tell me what happened. She's like, well, I asked for a pay raise and they said no. I was like, okay. And then what happened? And she's like, well, and that's it. I couldn't do it. And I was like, how long ago was this? And it'd been 5 years since she'd asked for a pay increase, right? And so you've got to keep asking the question because sometimes there's a good reason why they can't pay you more. Could be economic, could be they lost a client, could be compliance, who knows? But you've got to actually set the expectation that, hey, like you don't get to just like put me out to pasture and leave my salary where it is. We have to have a consistent ongoing conversation about that. The second thing is you need to do the boring work of preparing. If you want to earn an extra $500 a year, I trust everyone who's listening to be good. You'll be fine. Go for it. But if you want to make an extra 50K, an extra 30K, an extra 70 grand a year, like, you know, we've had clients get 6-figure pay increases. If you're looking to like really level up, then you better believe you got to put in some of that groundwork, right? You got to do the mental gymnastics ahead of time. You got to have a practice conversation with your roommate, your best friend, your partner, whoever, because you've got to be comfortable saying those numbers out loud. Ahead of time, right? And then the third thing that you have to do is really keep the receipts. Like it's not enough to say, hey, I'm amazing. I want to earn an extra $35,000.
Huge.
Yeah, like that's cute and that's nice. And like, but why?
Huge.
You know, like most businesses are there to be profitable. And like, why do you deserve an extra $35,000? Like, as opposed to if you say, hey, listen, super excited to talk to you about my compensation. As you know, I landed that massive client this year that's led to $200,000 of extra revenue. I've also retained our existing client and grown that pool by $50,000. I also started the intern program, which has been really great for our funnel and reduced our recruiting costs. And with all of this in mind, I'd love to talk to you about shifting my compensation moving forward. Because when you've got the data, you've got the numbers, you've got the percentage signs, you've got the dollars and cents lined up, that's a very different and more constructive conversation.
Absolutely. So what is something on your vision board that you have set out to do and accomplished this year?
It's a great question. I do a vision boarding exercise every year with the Pep Talk Her community and our mastermind. We do that every year at the start of the year. And this is from last year because this is a pretty big one. And I just cut out pretty pictures from magazines and things that speak to me. And I had this beautiful beach house, a photo of a beach house, and it was on the vision board, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I look at my vision board subconsciously every day because it's above my desk. But then we actually bought a beach house. And when I looked at the view of our beach house, it actually was kind of similar to the view from the vision board, which is so random because it was never even I didn't even think we'd be able to do that. It's just so interesting to me that when I went back at the end of the year and reflected, I was like, I had the beach house in a subconscious way on my vision board. It wasn't a conscious thing. Came up through a few circumstance situations, but yeah, I really believe in the power of setting those intentions consciously or unconsciously so that your brain can start to, and your energy can start to attract those things and people that will maybe bring those things into your life.
And you set the intention to work hard to achieve those goals.
Well, that's true too. Having that structure, having community around me, exactly, to keep that momentum going, which allows you the capacity to buy a house or to grow your business or whatever the case may be, or pay forward to other people. But yeah, it's such a great question, setting the intention. Yeah.
So if there was one thing that you could share with every single woman in the world, what would it be?
The one thing that I would say is to know how awesome you are, right? Like truly, like everyone listening, every person on this planet like has an essence in them that is so unique and that is so glorious and that is so needed by the world. And if you ever feel like you forget how awesome you are, I really want you to lean on other people and like explicitly ask, like text the WhatsApp group, text your friend and just be like, I'm having a bad day. I'm going to need a pep talk from you today, right? Like just ask people to give you the affirmation and the support that you need when you're having those spirally days, because that is what we know from neuroscience. That is what can pick your brain back up to start to focus on the positives. So that would be the one thing to say, is to know how awesome you are and to have that support crew there to remind you of that when you forget. And, you know, a big part of the reason why we built the Pep Talk Her app was to help with that. Like it's the whole idea of the whole science behind it is to become that nudge theory, that nudge, that that consistent, regular reminder of like, you're doing awesome at work, let's make sure you track that, track those receipts, keep the receipts, put all those positive pieces of feedback into the app so that you have data for your performance reviews, for when you're asking for more money, you know? So just like tricking your brain, using technology, using your community, whatever it takes to keep you in that positive mindset will really help everything else flow in a great way.
Your brand, Pep Talk Her, is truly a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I love that. And you are awesome.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, girl.
And I am so grateful that you were here to share that with me today. All of these gems and nuggets of information. Yeah. And I'd like to encourage anyone who is listening to check out Meggie's platform, Pep Talk Her. There's an app as well.
An app. Yeah, we have a team of executive coaches and we have a community. Yeah.
And the community is awesome. So I highly encourage everyone to check out Meggie, follow along, glean as much information as you can from this amazing woman. And I want to thank you for being here today, Meggie.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks for hosting me. And I'm so grateful for all the impactful conversations you're having on this podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.